want to take a minute to recognize that all the artists and all of you, that we're working together right now to break down stigma. This is what it's all about. So every year the show grows in size and the amount of people that participate by joining us for our opening night, but also contributing their work. So to us, that's a huge success. I would like to thank Beth and Leah and all of the staff from the Staunton Augusta Art Center. They have been fantastic every year, allowing us to host this here, and it's just fantastic. Yeah. What a great space.
We love doing it, and we love having all of you here. I mean, it means just as much to us as it does to the viewers and the artists, I think.
Whenever we do it, people are like, a real gallery? And we're like, yeah, it's like the nicest gallery around. So it's fantastic. I want to thank the Western State Art Department and Volunteer Services, but especially the Frame Shop. They have matted a lot of the work that you've seen, and so a lot of our residents there participated in that and worked countless hours doing it. I'd also like to thank my board, Mommy We Care Augusta, which has supported this event year after year. I want to give a special shout out to Laura Tomisto and Sydney, for that matter. Laura is on our board, but she also is the owner of Shenandoah Art Therapy, and she has been very instrumental in helping us with this event. So thank you so much, Laura. And I would like to give a huge thank you to Mental Health America of Augusta, which I just want you guys to look at this beautiful spread. We thought this was like art itself. And so Terry and Donna and all of their board have been so helpful in getting this show together this year. It has been the least stressful show that we've ever had. So I just want to thank you guys so much. I'd also like to thank Valley Community Service Board. They have helped us network with some of the artists that are in the show. And this is the first year that we've had art from the Commonwealth Center for Children and Adolescents. Both their recreational and their educational program helped to contribute art. And if you're on my left, you'll see the artwork there. That's all from the Commonwealth Center. We wanted to thank Monique Caleo and Crystal Graham, which have helped us network with the media this year. And we actually have a couple cool things that we're offering. We have Kim Page, who is an artist in our show, but she's also been kind enough to teach Zentangles. Do any of you guys know what Zentangles are? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we're really excited about it. And for those of you that don't know, check out the booth in the hallway, and she will set you up with learning how to Zentangle, which is a great coping skill to have. And we'd also like to thank Dominique Isadora, who is here playing the violin for us tonight, and it has been a fantastic addition for this is the second year now. Okay, I have a poem that I would like to read from a young lady who is at Western State, and she wanted me to share this with you guys tonight. She's not able to be here during this time. It's called Light. By the window I sit and stare, out the window is a glare. The sun shining brightly in my face. It's like mace. The light burns when I walk outside, too hot on my skin. Today it's raining and I'm really cold. I wish there was a glare in the air, maybe some sun on my face. This rain is a disgrace, and some sun in this place might be good in this space. Dark and gloomy won't do me any good. Let's let some light in, brighten up this place. And open up everything, because darkness is displaced when the sun shows his face. Ashley. And now I would like to welcome our guest speaker, Andi Chrisman. She's a mental health advocate that is joining us from Richmond, Virginia today. And she'll tell you all about her artwork and the work that she does. So welcome, Andi.
Thank you, everyone, for having me tonight. I am so excited to be exhibited alongside so many wonderful artists. This is such an amazing opportunity for me. I'm here to talk about my two passions, mental health and artwork. But before I get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about myself, because I am more than just a mental health diagnosis. I'm 31 years old, though you probably guessed I was about 20. My 23-year-old sister is often thought of as my twin, and the purple hair really doesn't help. I'm a really geeky girl. I love playing video games, and I play a lot of video games in my days. And in my days, I mean like yesterday. Working on Fallout 4 now. Woo! I have an associate's degree in digital media from a small tech school in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is a mixture of graphic and web design. I used to work as a PHP programmer for an advertising agency before I had to quit due to my disability. I'm a very active volunteer for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, both Central Virginia and Virginia State. I still use my expertise from my years in advertising to help with my volunteer experience. I run NAMI Central Virginia's Facebook page, and I'm the social media chairperson for this year's NAMI Walks 2016. NAMI Walks Virginia is our annual fundraiser, which goes to all of our NAMI members, including all of you in the room today. So I hope you will join us on October 15th, 2016, down in Richmond. My favorite part of working with NAMI is doing a program called In Our Own Voice. I go into multiple psychiatric units per week and go into crisis intervention team trainings for police officers and EMS workers, and I share my story of recovery from mental illness. I'm also going to be speaking to other CIT trainings with Vocal of Virginia, another Virginia nonprofit mental health organization. My first experiences with mental illness and art really began as a teenager. Since I am a geek and have always been a geek, I started making websites in middle school when we still used 28.8 kps modems and had to hand type all of our code by hand. At 5:13, I had developed a blog sharing the very exciting thoughts of a teenage girl, boys, school, clothes, that sort of really exciting thing. But we didn't call them blogs then, we called them online journals. I am legitimate old school internet people, okay? Well, by October 1999, my posts became darker and sadder, and eventually I started suffering from suicidal ideation. I wanted to die, but I didn't have a plan of action or any real push to do it. As the threat of Y2K loomed over us, I secretly hoped that Y2K would end the world so I didn't have to. You know how that turned out. But I shared openly on my blog about my mental illness, about what I was dealing with. During this dark time, I painted all of the furniture in my room bright colors, and overnight, without my parents' permission, painted all of the walls black, which I'm still not sure they're exactly happy about. I know my sister's not. My mom's shaking her head no. I know my sister's not because she lives in that room. I didn't know it at the time, but I have seasonal affective disorder. I get more depressed during the winter due to the lack of sunlight on Earth, and I take vitamin D supplements. I use a sun lamp and antidepressants to help balance that out. But back in 1999, instead of being supported, I was actually cyberbullied by a group of teenage girls who went to my school, who pretended to be my friends in real life, and left anonymous comments on my blog saying, "You're not really depressed, you're making it up for attention. If you were really depressed, you would kill yourself, and the world would be better off without you." I began cutting as a release from my emotional pain. My real friends told my guidance counselor, who called me in the last 5 minutes of the school day and said, "Are you cutting?" I said no. She said, "Okay, you can go get the bus." It was winter. I was wearing long sleeves, and if she had asked me to roll up my sleeves, she would have seen I was. I told my mom about the bullying and about my suicidal preoccupation, and she told me we'd get me into therapy, but unfortunately our insurance didn't cover mental health diagnoses, so it was put on the back burner. So I gave into the stigma. I knew there was something wrong with me, something real, but everyone outside was telling me I was overreacting. I can still remember crying out, "This is a real problem, I'm not making it up," in the hospital while being carted into the ER after a suicide attempt. I struggled for years knowing there was something wrong with me while being turned away at every chance I looked for hope and help. This crushed my self-esteem, and I believe was a contributing factor that led to a series of abusive relationships. In 2006, I was in one of these abusive relationships when I started having a stomach pain that no one could diagnose. I saw a gastroenterologist, urologist, gynecologist, and none of them could help me. But they were more than happy to give me pain medication, have some opiates and have some opiates and have some opiates. And I'm in this abusive relationship, and I start taking these narcotics, doesn't seem so bad. And that's how I started struggling with substance abuse. First with opiates, later with alcohol and other various chemicals. Art had dropped out of my life by then. Sure, I was a graphic and web designer, but making advertisements for spa companies and apartment complexes did not really seem like artistic expression, especially since my boss would design it and I basically put it onto the computer. I became suicidally depressed in 2009 and was hospitalized for the first time at a crisis stabilization unit. Afterward, I took an undetermined leave of time from work, and I started seeing a therapist and a psychiatrist through the CSB. The majority of my time was dedicated to my two favorite hobbies, drinking and playing World of Warcraft up to 16 hours a day. When my hobbies got me kicked out of my living arrangements, I attempted suicide for the first time when I had a breakdown in 2010. I overdosed on Tylenol PM and painkillers in my car in Fredericksburg. I was in the ICU at Mary Washington Hospital for 3 days before they announced my liver had completely failed and I needed to be transferred to VCU in Richmond to have a liver transplant. But by some sort of miracle, my liver came back on, using doctor terminology there. But instead of valuing my life after this miracle, I actually got a lot worse. I became out of control. My substance abuse skyrocketed. I had multiple suicide attempts. My therapist suggested a name for these over-the-top symptoms, suggesting I was suffering from what's called borderline personality disorder, which is ridiculous because my personality is just fine. I do have borderline personality disorder. Some of the symptoms I suffer from are black or white thinking, just like that, paranoia, self-destructive behaviors, an irrational fear of being alone or abandoned. I also struggled with impulsivity, self-harm, and I was even shoplifting for a while. I didn't want to accept the diagnosis because I felt like it was a puppy dog, and if I took it and named it, it would have to come home with me. My therapist suggested I read a book on BPD and highlight anything I agreed with. So I picked up the Borderline Personality Disorder Survival Guide and covered it in highlighting, agreeing with almost everything written in the book. I was often highlighting from inside of the psychiatric unit as I was hospitalized 10 times before I received my diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. Through the book, I learned about dialectical behavior therapy, an intensive therapy designed for people with BPD and other issues of emotional dysregulation. It was really hard for me to get into the program because I couldn't afford to go, and I had to wait until I was approved for disability. 100% of my disability income went to my therapy, but I threw myself into it, spending at least 15 hours a week doing diary cards, homework, and other worksheets trying to understand and overcome my impulsive suicide attempts and substance abuse. Not that my addiction was limited to substances. Trying to pull me away from the World of Warcraft was an addiction that was taking up the majority of my time. My therapist pushed me to start spending time working on other hobbies, like the art that I used to do in high school. I wasn't against the idea of art therapy, and I honestly enjoyed making art back in high school when I made collages to cover my binders. I also came up with a way of marbleizing acrylic paint using my fingers. I loved the messiness of the paint and the strange abstract textures and colors that came along with it. But I've never been good at drawing. I could draw with a mouse and pixels and anchor points, but not with a pencil. So I didn't think I could be an artist if I couldn't draw. I wanted to get away from my gaming addiction, and it helped that my mother, Andi Chrisman, who is here to support me today, is a full-time artist who teaches classes and has shown her work all over the country. It also helps that she has a great love of books, and we had a small library in our house of art books for me to peruse for inspiration. I searched through a variety of books and ideas for direction. I attempted a series of mixed media collages, but I wasn't happy with the process. It hadn't been as fun as it had been when I was in high school. Cutting up the paper seemed tedious, and it didn't help that I had severe osteoarthritis in my shoulder due to multiple shoulder dislocations. Dominant hand, of course. I stumbled across a book that truly inspired me. Surface Treatment Workshop, Explore 45 Mixed Media Techniques by Darlene Olivia McElroy. This book opened me up to a whole new world of textures and different mediums I had never played with before, and allowed me to finally begin to create my own niche in the world of art. The book used many mediums: acrylic paint, watercolor paint, ink, crayon, water, rubbing alcohol, glue, sponges, pill bottles, and even shaving cream to create interesting surface design in a way I had never experienced. The results weren't as important as the process. It was really about being mindful, enjoying the messiness and chaos of seemingly random patterns that dried in unique and different ways. Doing art gave me a way to get outside of myself and away from the emotional pain of BPD. My work didn't look like what I expected from art therapy. Instead of producing dark, depressing images that reflected my inner turmoil, I actually painted bright, colorful art that was full of substance and life. I used my artwork, I designed my paintings on a variety of paper. I eventually settled on thick watercolor paper and further transformed my artwork by cutting it up and making bookmarks, magnets, greeting cards, and other items that I would sell online and at craft shows in the area. Due to my shoulder injury, I don't get to paint nearly as much as I used to. Combining my love of handmade crafts and mental health awareness, I began to make mental health awareness ribbons in 2012. At first, I gave these ribbons out at craft shows and at support groups I attended, but I really wanted to get my ribbons out into the world. And it finally happened last October at the NAMI Walks 2015, where we used the ribbons as our art craft project. Me and a team of volunteers made ribbons before and during the show, during the walk, and it was so awe-inspiring to see over 2,000 people, not 200,000, 2,000 people wearing the ribbons that me and a team of volunteers had assembled before and during the show. And I'm excited to announce that we will be using the ribbons again for the 2016 NAMI Walk. I now sell them online, and they're part of my personal project, DIY for Mental Health, and I offer the instructions free of charge on my website. There are ribbons in the back and business cards, so you can get a copy of that. Now to show you the artwork that was selected for this exhibit. The first three pieces are entitled, as they came from larger pieces that were cut down. All three were made using a simple technique, which is one of my favorites to use. First, I would paint a layer of color down, and next, after it dried, I would cover it with glue and then immediately paint over it with another layer of acrylic paint. As the paint and the glue dried, the glue would crackle and break apart, and you could see the underlayer of each piece. Using different types of glue would provide different types of crackle patterns. This one, I used a lot of metallics. This one, I used different contrasting in the background. And all of them, I used an embossing machine called a Cuttlebug to emboss them. The next piece is called Self-Portrait, a work in progress. After being diagnosed with BPD, I really clung to that title. For me, it finally justified years of inexplicable behavior and irrationally strong feelings. Multiple therapists tried to address this issue with me, but only one gave me homework: create a self-portrait that showed I was more than my diagnosis. Using the idea of the Venn diagram, I separated the different parts of myself into different circles of different sizes corresponding to how I identified with them. I crumpled up the one about mental illness, I used inks on the one about art, and I used foam to make them stand out in 3D. Lynn Otto, my therapist, loved it and asked to keep it, but was kind enough to send it in for the show. She keeps it hanging in her office and says it still inspires others today. The circles have changed sizes, names, and titles since I first made it in 2014, but I still really love this piece. And finally, my last piece is this one back here called Herringbone. This was inspired by a Pinterest project. It's 4 canvases, all painted in acrylics and complementary bright colors, and then patterned to spread the color throughout the whole piece. Next, I cut out at least 100 6-inch pieces of painter's tape and laid them in a herringbone pattern on each of the canvases. I then painted each canvas white, let it dry, and carefully removed the pieces of tape. And this is the finished project. I keep it hanging over my bed because it soothes me. And every time I look at it, I can always find more and different things that inspire me when I look at it. Art was one of many of the tools and coping mechanisms I used to enter recovery. Recovery does not mean I am symptom-free, but I am better at handling them, and I am more aware of my body and what I need, and I'm able to take care of myself better. As I mentioned earlier, I'm extremely active as a speaker and a volunteer for NAMI. Doing this volunteer work is now my full-time job, and it is an important part of my recovery. I do everything from menial data entry to speaking in front of large groups and sharing NAMI via wellness fairs in the community. Next month, I will be speaking to CIT teams with Vocal, more from the perspective of what officers can do to help us while we're in crisis, instead of focusing on my personal story. In February, I was trained to become a peer specialist. Now I'm finishing a giant stack of paperwork, so I will become a certified peer recovery support specialist here in Virginia, where I can use my lived experience to help others with their recovery. Thank you for this opportunity to allow me to come speak and share my artwork with you all. I hope you will continue to use art as a method of self-expression and therapy, but I always end my speeches with the same quote, and I will again today. I want to inspire. I want someone to look at me and say, because of you, I didn't give up. Author unknown. Thank you all.
Okay, so Andi, thank you so much for coming. That was an amazing story, and thank you, Kathleen.